Hi, it's Patrick. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Photoshop. Really, I'm assuming that you already know the basics of Photoshop by just looking at some of the videos and resources that are already in the Moodle course shell. However, I want to show you how to do some basic things like create a course banner and a concept map, and then how to throw that in Dreamweaver. So this is going to be kind of fast, but it's just supposed to give you an overview. There are lots of resources on the web, so whenever you want to do something in Photoshop, if you Google a couple search terms in Photoshop, you should be able to find some resources. And really, Photoshop is such a complex program. There's no way you're going to master it in this semester. You're really just supposed to learn how to do some basic images for educational websites. So what I'm going to do is I have Photoshop open, and I have a picture here that I'm going to drag over. So this is a picture I took. And so you can notice it's not really the best size for a banner image. So, one of the things you can do is you can crop an image like this. So I could go over to the crop tool, and so, be aware that you have your basic tools over here, and if I click on the crop tool, notice the options up here change for each tool, and that you have your panels over here, or your windows, and that you can add more as you see fit. So cropping it, I could definitely, do something like trying to crop it so it's more in the layout of a banner image, but another option is that I could also just make my canvas a different size, and rather than use this as the whole image. So let me kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to hit cancel here. I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to go to image, canvas size. I'm going to change to pixels. And right now, I'm just going to do something much wider. I'm going to bring it like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up, and I'm going to change this canvas a little bigger. And so I'm going to change back to pixels. And the width I'm going to make more like 1200. Let me try that once more. 12,000. So now that I have this more in line with something that I want, and I could play around with changing the color of the canvas. I could equally, add a new layer and make this new layer white, let's say. And I can drag this up on top. So now let's pretend that this is more what I want. I'm going to change my view to about 7%, and I'm going to come over here now to crop, and I'm going to crop this so this is looking more like something that I might want to do. So now I'm going to hit this plus sign, and I can go up to this image, and I can still resize this now to something more realistic, like 960 is real common. So now I have my lighthouse, I could just call this white background. I can use these text tools. Let me hit escape. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to click on the lighthouse and text tool. I'll drag it as far as I think. And up here, this is where I can adjust this. I could decide to go with maybe some red text. Click on the text tool again. Come back up here. I can adjust that size a little and see what I want to do with that. And there's lots of other ways that you could use shapes, lines. Let's try that once more. Alright, so let's say that this was something that I wanted. Now notice that that shape, that color's pink, but let's look past that because we want to keep moving. I can do a save as, because I always want to save it as a Photoshop file. because that native Photoshop file will keep these layers and let me edit it later. However, if I want to use it for the web, I want to then save it as or export. So I can do a quick export as a PNG. I like PNG files because they work really good for the web, and they also have transparent background. But you can use a JPEG. Sometimes you can use a GIF as well. So I could do a quick export, export as, or even under save as, you'll find that I can save it as a JPEG. And so I can adjust the quality if I wanted to. I'm going to leave that there. So I've created these files over here. But what I also want to point out is if I go to Google Images, I can even type, say, mountain banner, and I can find things that are already kind of shaped the way I might want my banner image to look. And so, I could click on this and, save that. But I also try to point out to students that it's good to know that under search tools, you can search for stuff that you can reuse. Now, especially in cases where you're creating a concept map where you might be taking lots of different images and creating something new and using it for educational purposes, some would say you wouldn't need to do this extra step. But I think it's always good. And then it's also good, I think, to remember where you got the image so you can give attribution. So I'm going to save this image. And I have another video where I talk about different ways that you can use attribution. But in this one, I'm going to close this and drag this in. And you can see it locks this background layer, but I can always unlock it. But for now, what I want to do is I want to click on, let's click on this box. Let's try that once more. But you can even see actually that gradient feel, how that could be another way to add some contrast. So you could find that if you click up here, you'll have different options of how to do this, right? And so I'm going to create a new layer. Just call it contrast, and I'm going to click on there. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is what I meant to do before was go to the shape tool and get a rectangle. And I'm going to drag that here, and you can see it added a new rectangle. And so in this case, I'm going to play with this opacity. So if I find that I get a layer and I'm not happy with it, I'll delete it and I'll start over. So now I'm going to type here. I'm going to type one bit of text because then I like to make sure I get the color exactly how I want it. And sometimes even the size, but so just like that, I created one more banner image. So I'm going to save this because I want to save it first as my Photoshop file. And then I'm going to save, and we'll just do a ping just so you can compare these and you can see which one looks better. But see how it even gives me some compression options, so that looks good. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to do is create a concept map, and this is going to be really basic. I've not even thought through how I'm going to do this. So I'm going to go to New, and I'm just going to, you can see you have different options here, and so you can, do default Photoshop size if you want to. A lot of times for the web, I might just start with web, because you notice how it has that 72 pixels per inch. That's nice. So I come up here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Google Images, and let's think of, we'll say types of boats, maybe. Boat icon. So let's say there's this one. It's actually really big, and arguably it's too big, but for what we want to do, it'll be fine. And go to free transform. Then I'm going to hold my shift key down, and I'm just going to drag that over here. So now let's imagine we can even just think of different types. So you usually want to, really think through that these are kind of the same size and type. And then maybe, what else? A plane. Let's do a plane. All right. You can see that the plane's enormous as well. Just holding down the shift key to keep you can see that with the transform key, when I get that little curve, I can do things to rotate it if I wanted to. And so I'm going to hit apply, drag it here. And there are ways, interesting ways that you can use shape to, for something like this. But what I first want to say is it's really helpful to sometimes name your layers. Okay, so let's say this is kind of what I want. So what I could do is play with some of these shapes. I'm going to go over here to properties, and I'm going to go with no fill. Let's try that again. So I wanted to use the border and not the fill. In this case, I might even play with making it even smaller. So sometimes then if I have something like that I can take that and I can always copy it. So this round rectangle, then duplicate it. And I'm going to drag it over. So once I'm just using my little arrow key, I'm going to drag it over there. And I'm going to do the same thing again. And I'd want to spend some time actually labeling these layers, because it can get confusing if you don't. But you start to see this plane doesn't quite fit the way I want. So I could see adjusting that more so it has equal white space, but I think this works. So now if I come back here and I go to shapes, I can do like the line tool, and you can imagine doing something like this. Okay, then I could go back and let's take a different shape. And now I'm going to go to my text. So you notice how can't see it real well. So I'm going to go up here and maybe we'll go with red. I usually actually don't use red that much because it can be a problematic color, but for some reason I'm wanting to choose that today. Alright, so I'm going to click back on my font, make sure I get that red again. So you could see having a nice design effect without it. Alright, so let's pretend that this was what I wanted. So now image size, before I leave, I want this to be more like 400 pixels. So I like the transparent background, but the reality is this this one icon I got actually has a white background. So I might find before I go forward that it might be. So I can't see right now where to change the background of this artboard, this canvas is the way I think about it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to create a giant square with a white background, and I'm going to make sure it is at the very bottom of my layer. So that was a quick and dirty hack, but really that's with Photoshop, there's a million ways to do everything. So I'm going to change this out. I'm going to name this concept map. So step 1, save your Photoshop file. Step 2, export it. So I'm going to just go ahead and save as. And we'll just use a JPEG this time, going back and forth. Alright, so we're done with Photoshop. Hopefully that gave you a quick and dirty introduction, if you will. So I'm going to, in fact, quit Photoshop. Okay, and then I'm going to open Dreamweaver. Okay, so I'm just going to open a file, an example file that I've used before. And this is basically a file that was created with one of the Dreamweaver templates that they used to have in CS6. They don't provide them anymore, but I did upload them to the core shell. So in this case, I don't have an external CSS file. I have everything up here in the head. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by deleting the text in the header. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open my edTech2 folder and put all the images that I want to use there. So now when I go to save this, I'm going to have no problems. Alright, so I put my cursor back in my header, and you can even see it right there. Go to Insert Image. Try this one. Okay, so you can see that nice pink that I left in there. But when I add a banner image, it looks pretty good. It, could be adjusted, but the first thing I have to do is add some alt text. So this is where I can look at this header and see I might have some margin or something or padding. So I do have some padding. So I want to get rid of that, or just change the padding to 0 pixels. So let's save all, and let's preview. So in this sample page, you can see that the banner image, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing, but you can see where they come in really handy. The biggest thing with banner images tends to be is you want to make sure that it makes sense, whatever background image you're using for the focus of your website. You want to try to not have too many images. Some people have just 5 different images, and then it just becomes overwhelming. And you really want to make sure that whatever text you add is legible and someone can see it. So let's close this, and let's go back and let's delete it, and let's add the second one. Okay, so you can see this one I didn't resize well, so I really want to go back and resize this in Photoshop. But for time, I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and do this. The problem with doing it this way, is that it's going to take the image too long to load, really. But here's a different type. So this one's not as high or tall, if you will. But, it looks good. I have to figure out, what's going on there. Is it padding? Is it, some other things? I thought I had deleted it. Not going to really spend much time here. I didn't add the alt text, though. So I'd want to do something like that and tighten it up. But overall, this looks good. So now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add the concept map. So I'm going to put my cursor here, and I'm going to click on Image and Concept Map. Okay, I really didn't size this one well either, so I would want to do that. But let's... Because the problem with it being like this in Dreamweaver is it just takes too long to load. But for now, we're going to leave this like this. And so I could take something like this and take up the whole page. Or I could do something like this where I have text wrapping around it. And so there's not really a right or wrong way. It just should make sense with your design decision. So I'm going to save this. So now I got to make sure I'm in design view. If I'm in live view, it doesn't work. But if I click on the image, I should see down here the hotspots. Now if I don't, I just click off, I click back on, and Dreamweaver eventually seems to get it right. There it goes. It takes a while, don't really know why. So down here I can click on this map tool and I can cover it. And I could say just making stuff up. I need to make sure that I have it open in a new window, and I give some alt text. Okay, so I'm going to click on the image again, and be aware that you have some other options if there was a reason you preferred the circle. And one more time. I'm going to save all, and I'm going to preview it. Okay, so now you can see if I mouse over, okay, if I click on it, opens a new window. So you want to make sure that you test each one of these. But this is the basic idea of what a concept map is. Not even sure what it's wanting to do right now. You want to give directions so the user knows what they're supposed to do and how to interact with it. But there's lots of ways to use this same principle. It doesn't have to be in a concept map. You could imagine an image where it had a boat and then text next to it in a description, a car, text next to it in a description. So there's lots of ways you can do this. So what I will say is for the CSS, so if I click on my image, click down here. If I go to CSS Designer, I can click on the plus sign, and you can see the selector came up where it says section, paragraph, image tag. Normally I'd get rid of that section and paragraph because I just want to apply something to the image tag. But the problem is I have an image up here. And so what I'm doing down here I don't want to do up there. So I'm going to keep this, so this only is going to influence images that I put in a section tag that's in a paragraph tag. So I'm going to go down here and double click to make that. So that looks good. So now I'm going to hit the plus sign here, and I'm going to hit show set, and I'm going to float this right. And so you can see by doing that, the text is wrapping around it. Now you could decide, well, that's not really where I want it. So there are ways that you can drag it around and tweak that some more. But just like that, we created a concept map and fireworks. Just like that, we created a concept map in Photoshop, and we added it to Dreamweaver and added some hotspots. So I hope this was helpful. Have fun with Photoshop. Experiment with Photoshop. There's a lot of great things you can do with it. Thanks.